I want to take some time and talk about Ron DeSantis for a bit. I know a lot of the people who are familiar with Contemporary are going to think that this video is going to be a full-on Ron DeSantis hate fest. Because I have been very clear since Ron DeSantis started getting famous that I really have absolutely no intention on voting for the guy, no matter what it is that he does. But Ron DeSantis, honestly, when I do a good, careful analysis of him, and I've been thinking about this for a little while, is actually, for a governor, probably one of the better candidates out there, but I want to explain why he can't win on a national stage. Both now and basically since he started running for the presidency all the way back in 2019, 2020. So let's talk a bit about what's happening with Ron DeSantis. Now, Ron DeSantis will clear the age question with no problem. DeSantis is actually only a few years older than I am. Born September 14th, 1978, which means he is 46. He'll be 47 this year. And if he were, by some miracle, to be elected to the presidency, he would be 48 upon attaining and taking the oath of office. But he really can't. And there are a lot of things that go into that, and I'm going to be completely honest, some of them are not his fault. Some of them are the fault of the previous Republican president. Some of them are the fault of his fans. And yes, some of them are coming from his own direct action. Now, Ron DeSantis was elected governor in 2018 in a squeaker. At the very, very, very last second, Andrew Gillum, who the Democrat Party was all in on, like ridiculously all in on, was found in a hotel room with, I believe, a male hooker and a bunch of drugs. Passed out, blacked out. If I remember correctly, he was actually within inches of his life, too, at the time. And, well, that story got made public, and Andrew Gillum's chances were shot. But, I mean, regardless of that, because of the little D after his name, he did better than he probably should have at the time. Ron DeSantis should have done way better against Andrew Gillum, given the fact that it was just a little bit before Election Day he was found out in that hotel room. But that was a squeaker of the race. The former president is correct on that. That was an absolute squeaker. And he just barely was able to hang on. He was able to come in and be the governor of Florida. And then he started being the governor of Florida, and it changed his political profile. Part of that came from the corporate press, who were looking for somebody desperately to replace Trump on the ticket, number one. And number two, part of that was because of his participation in the culture war. Now, as the governor of Florida, he's done things like take on Disney, which that may or may not have come based on the fact that they decided to pull their donations from him over the, quote, "Don't Say Gay" bill, even though that wasn't a "Don't Say Gay" thing. And he really had no problem with them afterwards. In fact, I've read reports from people from Florida who said that the special district for Disney was something that Floridians have had a problem with for years before that, and yet he didn't choose to go after them until they decided to go after him, essentially, when you're looking at the grand scheme of things. So there's that strike into this, but I've been open about the fact that I was not impressed by Ron DeSantis pretty much from the time that people started talking about him for 2024. And I've even said right from the beginning, I wouldn't vote for him. The first couple years of his governorship were marked by a series of executive orders in which he bragged at the time about going directly around the legislature to do. Now, once he started getting called out about some of this stuff, he started to back off on it. And I'll give him credit for that, and most of the rest of his gubernatorial victories have been legislative. It wasn't something he had to go out and do an executive order for. He was able to get the Florida legislature into shape to have them come out and give him the bills that he wanted so he could go out and sign them and do so. But the fact that he was so comfortable with the EO pen to begin with is the reason where I said I will not support Ron DeSantis. And a lot of other people have gone against him for various other reasons as they go. Now, I said at the top this was not going to be a Ron DeSantis hate fest, and it's not. Ron DeSantis has done wonderful things for the people of Florida. And his next election was a blowout. And that's not entirely based on the weakness of Charlie Crist, by the way, either. But the DNC was all in on getting rid of him, to the point that they paid Dorsey and his people, Agrawal at the time mostly, to make sure that Nikki Fried was posted and parked right out in front of absolutely everybody, whether they followed her or not, bragging and telling us about how she was going to take down Ron DeSantis, how Ron DeSantis was such a unique danger to the country and to the world that she had to go in there as an agriculture secretary and take him down. And yet she couldn't pull single digits versus weak-ass Charlie Crist. And then, yes, as expected, given a lot of factors with Florida, as we all remember from 2022, absolute 100% blowout election against Charlie Crist. Now, that is due in part to a couple of things that do not apply to running for a national race. Specifically migration. And not legal and illegal immigration like he is a staunch supporter of, but migration in and out of a state. Florida was, and still is to this point as far as I know, the top destination, especially coming out of blue states, for conservatives disaffected by blue state policies to go to. It's got a very friendly business climate. It does have a bit of a higher tax rate. And the property value is going up right now because there are so many people that are migrating to there. And when they do, and I've sparred with my friend Sewell on this before online, of the Porch Boys. If you don't know them, go check them out. But I've sparred with Sewell, and some of it's been trolling, and some of it has been reality of this, is the people that are leaving these blue states, disaffected by blue state policy, are not taking their voting patterns with them. I like to tease him because he lives in another big destination. And I think some of the Californians are taking their voting patterns and taking them to Texas, but not enough to make a dent in deep, deep red Texas. But as far as Florida, like, you get the New Yorkers, the people from Mass. I have a demonym for the people from Mass because I lived there for 2 years, but again, I'm not trying to be insulting when I do this, but like, you've got the Indonesians are going out there, even the Californians, especially from SoCal, looking at Florida as a similar climate destination with a friendlier business climate, that are all going down to Florida. And even red state people are going down to Florida as well, because of the fact that it has such a friendly business climate, because DeSantis got it open. But on top of that, based on what leftoids on Twitter who used to live in Florida are saying, and, you know, sometimes you do have to question whether or not they're actually doing some of this, or whether or not they're just blowing hard bravado, but it does appear, if we take this conversation piece seriously, a lot of them migrated from Florida because of the fact that it's not friendly to gays, and it's not friendly to woke, and they're saying don't say gay, and we have to go somewhere else, otherwise we'll be prosecuted as a teacher. Oh no, what will we do? Well, again, whether or not the majority of them have done so is up to speculation, and I'd like to see some of the statistics of that as well, of how many by political affiliation have left Florida in this. But if we take them at their word, that means you have a massive influx of voters coming into Florida, reddening it, plus the blue coming back up and leaving. Which is part of the reason that, even though he's not doing as well as they think that he should, on a national stage, he did an absolute blowout. And that seat of his, even if he screws himself politically, that seat of his is safe red for the near future. Possibly for the long-term future. We will see what happens with this, and what happens when his successor, no matter when he gets ousted from that office, what his successor does with that seat. As far as the reasons why I don't think that he can be president, number one, obviously, there's not the migration issue, state to state, because it's a national race. He can maybe gain some of the system and do the electoral college dance and everything else like that, but as far as a national race, I mean, it's not like he's pulling in all the conservative folk by our standards of conservative, not by the international standard of conservative, but by our standard of conservative, he's not pulling them in from Gambia and the Ukraine and Finland and China and Japan and Argentina and places like that. He's not pulling them in, and he's certainly not pushing the leftoids out of the country as much as they brag about the fact that if X such and such political candidate wins X such and such office, most likely the president, I'm just going to go move up to Canada. They're much more friendly to my social agenda. Well, a lot of these people found out in 2016. And yes, even though a lot of people came out and made fun of them for the fact that they never left, I know for a fact that a lot more of them attempted than what the MAGA crowd will give them credit for. But they ran into the fact that Canada has an immigration policy. They don't just let anybody in. It's the same thing where if DeSantis were to get elected president, a lot of these leftoids are not going to get up and run to Canada because they can't. Because they have to get a sponsor, they have to have a job ready and waiting for them when they come in, they have to have X amount of money. I think they have to have X amount of credit score in the U.S., no tickets, especially no DUI, and a host of other things that a lot of them cannot keep up. So they're going to stay here, and they're going to vote as hard as they can, early and often in some of their cases, against Ron DeSantis. Add that to the fact, and one of the hardest parts for Ron DeSantis is his relationship with the Donald. And I think if he'd have waited till 28 to do this, that issue wouldn't be a thing with him. Number one, he waffled so hard on the indictment thing. Mainly because he thinks he's untouchable. And, I mean, that's the rhetoric that's coming from his fans as well. Oh, well, they can't turn around and get Ron DeSantis on any crimes because he hasn't committed any. Bullshit. That is a load of crap, and you know it. And, you know, you're right. Maybe he might not have an indictment sitting out there waiting for him or anything bad. And, hey, he might be happily married, so nobody can bring a sexual assault case against him. No. And you know why I know that's false? Because you DeSantis fans showed him what works, or showed Democrats rather what works. You went out publicly, and you've been advised not to do this, by the way. You went out publicly on X and on Facebook and on Instagram and told the world that you could never be brought to vote for somebody who was so sexually immoral that he's been married 3 times and he's cheated on all of his wives. Somebody who has children by multiple different women. Somebody who's been indicted. We can't elect somebody who's been indicted. What are we doing? We can't elect this criminal. You showed them what works. And mark my words, if by some miracle Ron DeSantis were to get into the presidency, there is somebody waiting in the wings to come out and say, oh my God, he raped me. Oh, I can't remember the day or the time, but oh my God, he raped me. It was horrible. And I'm sure that there is somebody who was on his campaign staff at some point during his run for the House, during his run for the governorship, and hey, maybe even during his presidential run says, hey, you know, these records here, they don't quite add up. They're not quite perfect. And I think that he's using this in a way to try to steal the election, which would be a misdemeanor, but used in the commission of a felony. It's a felony, we can indict him. That on top of the fact, I mean, there are books and statistics out there because of the onerous burden of our legal system Most people out there commit 3 felonies a day and don't even know it because there are just so many obscure laws out there that unless you are a top level Harvard educated lawyer, you have no idea that you're breaking. I bet you at least one of those is waiting in the wings for them to come after him with. The old communist mantra, and so many of the especially progressives and far, far left have gone down to the mantra, is you bring me the man and I will find you the crime. They will find the crime for this guy. The biggest problem, though, for DeSantis, it's not what he did with the Donald. It's not the fact that he ran against the Donald. Those are working against him. It's his fans, and I love a great many of Ron DeSantis' fans individually. Wiz Political is probably one of my favorite follows on X, on Twitter. He is so adamantly in the tank for DeSantis, though, and he fits this caricature perfectly. It's the fact, and they'll all tell you that the Donald started it, which he probably did. But no matter who started it, it doesn't make it right. And what am I talking about? Of course, the insults. Now, I call everybody out when they do this bullshit, because it is the dumbest thing you can possibly think of. But this will uniquely affect DeSantis if he does manage to eke his way into the nomination, either with Donald becoming imprisoned or killed, dead from a coronary because he ate too much McDonald's, killed because they JFK'd his ass, or put up on such a charge that he could never take the presidency to begin with, in spite of the fact that a lot of people will still vote for him and write him in, even if he cannot appear on a ballot or take the inaugural oath. Because the country was good under Donald. But it's the fans who cannot fathom the idea of putting Trump into office anymore so much that if there is a good-spirited debate that goes both ways, or some MAGA person comes off and goes off the cannon and starts insulting, they can't do anything but go back and insult that person back. I have seen MAGA people called cultists, Q cultists, which is a leftoid term, by DeSantis people, by the way, toothless hicks, uneducated backwards morons, suspenders wearers, religious cultists, MAGA religion, and a host of other insults meant to degrade the fact that these people would still be willing to vote for Donald Trump, in spite of, again, the fact that their lives were significantly better under him. And I've made this analysis many, many times before. The vast core of MAGA and Trump supporters, and you guys remember this from 2016, 2017, and especially into 2018 when a lot of people were coming out of the woodwork and actually talking about this. The vast core of Trump supporters, MAGA, is Reformed Democrats. Don't tell the leftoids this, because they absolutely hate hearing this. And if somebody actually goes and says, hey, I voted for Trump, but I used to be a Democrat, they'll come out and tell you, you were never a Democrat, ever. You could never, ever be a Democrat and vote for Trump. Well, a lot of them got left behind by the progressive vision of the Barack Obama presidency. No, they were not willing to go into Jesus, or let's go to war with everything Republican rhetoric, like the Jeb Bushes, or Ron Johnson before he jumped onto the MAGA team. They weren't willing to go down into that route, but they found another former Democrat. Now, why am I saying all this and framing this out here when I'm talking about Ron DeSantis? It's simple. These people have already been left behind by one political party. The Democrat Party left them behind in favor of going after rich, elite, college-educated folks who are going to give progress to this country. And you don't need that dirty factory job anymore. We'll get you a better job. You just have to learn to do something that I can't say on YouTube. And you do that, and you'll have your wonderful job. We don't need these jobs. These jobs pollute anyway. And here comes a former New York Democrat telling the things that they want to hear. And these people are not going to go off and vote for a traditional conservative, which is before he went back and retooled himself, what Ron DeSantis was trying to run as, an evangelocon. Because it ingratiated him to the evangelocon base, who was Republican and who possibly did vote for Trump in 2016 and 2020, but didn't want to do it again because, as aforementioned, his 3 wives and his kids by 3 different women, and he cheated on all of them, and Stormy Daniels, and this and that and the next thing. Why I say that's unique to DeSantis is because a lot of the people in the core DeSantis base are vote red or we're all dead. Whereas a lot of the Trump people, if you just keep insulting them, they're just going to stay home. I would bet, and this is an official prediction, if DeSantis were to somehow become the nominee on election day, 90% of the MAGA faithful either stay home entirely or write in Trump on the presidential line. I think that a lot of the same thing would happen with DeSantis fans if Trump became the nominee, which he is most likely to do. But I don't think the ratio would be the same. I think it would be either 50-50, but I think it could go as much as 70-30 in Trump's favor. 70% of the core DeSantis people would look and say, we've got to vote red, we've got to do whatever it takes, we've got to stop Joe Biden. And I don't think that there are enough people in the MAGA coalition who would do the same thing. I would say it's probably, I said 90% before, I would say it's probably 80 to 90% of MAGA would stay home. So, again, DeSantis, fantastic governor of Florida. Hit on a lot of the issues, and again, there was an out for people who didn't want to live under DeSantis' rule. The only issue now with DeSantis is whether or not he stays in or whether he gets out. And I do think that if he stays in, especially if the Donald gets jailed, the smartest thing for Ron DeSantis to do right now would be to drop out of the race entirely. Go back and say, you know what? The people of Florida need me. They need me more than anything else right now. I'm going to try this again in 2028, but the people of Florida need me. They're my constituents first. This is my home. This is where I grew up, which he did, done it in Florida. I've represented them to the United States Congress before. I've been their governor, and I need to be here for them until such time as 2028 rolls around and we can see what happens with the political pulse. But he probably won't do that. Part of it's pride. Part of it's the fact that he is sitting here waiting in the wings because, by polls, he is heir apparent to take over as the Republican nominee. There's not yet been a poll. There's been one poll, I should say, so far in all of the polling where he has come in third place. To Christie, of all fucking people. He is going to sit and stay in and see if the Donald gets jailed or not, which is stupid. Especially given the power that he has behind him as a Florida governor. Because if he goes out and stays in, and the Donald gets ousted, or JFK for that matter, or again, dies of a massive coronary because he eats nothing but McDonald's, one of the three, and Ron DeSantis is now the nominee, and next thing you know, they've got that indictment slapped on him, and his alleged rape victim coming forward, and all the other hell that they are going to put on him, and they've already made it point blank clear that they intend to put all this hell onto whoever the Republican nominee is. Then now he has to go back, flush full of campaign ads against him to try to defend his gubernatorial seat in Florida against his Democratic challenger, who is going to bring up his indictment for whatever it is that they bring forward to him, and his alleged rape victim, and everything else. Whereas if he goes back and he says, okay, we're going to try this again in 2028, they will probably bring the same things forward, but he'll have more time to prepare and actually go through and scrub his history, figure out what's out there, what it is he's done, and hey, maybe even some strategists will tip their hand and they'll accidentally say what it is they're going to try to pull against him. So that's Ron DeSantis in a nutshell. I know this video has gone on for 25 full minutes, but I wanted to talk about this and talk a bit about where he's at. And we will see you not next week, because I'm out of town next weekend, so I can't record a video like this. But in 2 weeks, we'll already know what's happening with the arrest in Georgia. We'll know what happened on debate night, and I feel like that will be the time to talk about the Donald and why I think that he might win, but I'm still not going to vote for him. Take care. Have a good night, guys.